I'm Leah Ramirez, 32, a legal assistant and only daughter. It was just past 7:30 p.m. The hallway outside ICU room 4B bathed in fluorescent silence. The vinyl floor was too clean, the air too sterile, and the chair I'd been stuck in for hours was covered in stiff navy upholstery that scratched against my bare knees. I clutched the tote bag in my lap like it held something sacred, though all it contained was a half-read paperback and a crushed packet of almonds. Behind the double-glass doors, my mother lay hooked to machines I wasn't allowed to see. Machines that beeped and hissed and sighed with each breath she didn't take on her own. I had gotten the call 3 hours earlier. "She's had another episode," the nurse said. "Not sure how long she'll hold on?" I had dropped everything, left contracts unsigned on my desk, didn't even log out of my computer and rushed to the hospital. But when I arrived, they wouldn't let me in. "She's requested no visitors," the man at the desk said flatly. I stared at him. He wore pale blue scrubs and a white badge clipped to his chest, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. "She's my mother," I said, slowly. "You're telling me my mother put me on some kind of no-entry list?" He hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Her son and her sister are with her now. You'll have to wait until they leave." I blinked. "Her son? You mean David?" He nodded, but there was no apology in his tone. "They signed the paperwork earlier. You're not on the list of approved contacts." I looked past him to the secured door, heart thudding. "So I just sit out here like a stranger, I don't make the rules," he muttered, already turning back to his screen. I sank into the hard chair, burning with shame. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and distant cafeteria food. A janitor's cart squeaked past, rattling like coins in a tin. For the first hour, I thought it was a mistake. For the second, I thought David would come out and explain. But by the third, I started realizing something deeper. This wasn't just about today. If you've ever been shut out of your own family while pretending it didn't break you, leave a comment or just let me know where you're watching from. Hit like if you've ever felt invisible around the people who should know you best. At 8:07, the double doors opened. A nurse stepped out. Not the one from earlier. This one had short gray hair, warm brown eyes, and a clipboard tucked under her arm. Her name tag read, Melinda, RN. She didn't look at the desk clerk. She looked directly at me. "Are you Leah?" she asked. I stood, almost startled by the sound of my own name. "Yes, I'm her daughter." She nodded slowly, walked over, and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small, sealed envelope. "She told me to give this to you." I took the envelope with both hands. My name was written on the front in my mother's handwriting, thin, elegant cursive. The nurse hesitated. "They don't know she wrote it." "Who?" I whispered. "Your brother. Your aunt. She wrote it 2 days ago. Asked me to wait for you. Said you'd come. Behind us." The hallway grew quiet. The clerk looked up. The janitor paused. Even the machine humming near the corner went still for a moment. And then Melinda said, clearly and calmly, "You need to come with me now. She asked for you." Every head turned. Even David, who had just stepped into the hallway, looking smug and unaware, froze mid-step. His mouth parted as he saw me being led past the threshold. The nurse's hand gently on my back. I crossed into the room they told me I didn't belong in, and silence fell like a curtain. The air inside room 4B felt like it belonged to another world. Everything was muted, muffled, as if grief had soaked into the paint and machinery. My shoes made no sound on the smooth floor. The lights were dimmer than the hall's harsh glow, and in the corner, the rhythm of my mother's breathing machine marked time in low, mechanical sighs. She looked impossibly small, not like the woman who used to tower in our living room. one hand on her hip and the other holding a wooden spoon like a conductor's baton as she directed our chaotic childhoods. Not the woman who handled divorce, bankruptcy, and David's legal trouble like a steel pillar wrapped in linen. She looked folded in on herself, fragile in a way I hadn't imagined. Melinda gave my arm a light squeeze and then stepped back, letting me go forward alone. I approached slowly, unsure whether I should speak. My mother's eyes were closed. I held the envelope tighter in my hand, not opening it yet. It felt like a pulse, like it might vanish if I looked away. "Mom," I whispered. My voice cracked, and I hated that. No response, just the click of a monitor, a soft hiss of oxygen. "She's resting," Melinda murmured from the door. "But she's aware. You can talk to her." So I sat, not on the stiff visitor's chair behind the curtain, but on the edge of the bed, like I used to when I was 10 and couldn't sleep after a nightmare. Back when she would hum a Spanish lullaby and run her fingers through my hair. I looked at her face, pale, wrinkled in places I hadn't noticed before. Her mouth twitched slightly, like she was trying to say something but didn't have the strength. I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, her signature cream paper with the faint floral border. The ink had smudged slightly at the top, probably from her hand trembling. "Leah, if you're reading this," then I kept my promise to make sure they couldn't keep you away. "I know how things have looked, and I know you've been carrying more than your share of silence. I want you to know the truth now, even if I can't say it aloud." I stopped reading. My throat felt tight. I looked up at her again. Her fingers moved slightly under the blanket, as if echoing the gesture of handing me the letter. I didn't name David as power of attorney because I trust him more. I did it because he expected it, and because if I didn't, he would have made a scene again. I didn't want you to be the one fighting him while I was dying. A lump formed in my chest, but the real one is in the blue folder in the linen cabinet, behind the towels. I asked Melinda to make sure you knew where to find it. Everything's been written the way it should have been years ago. I just didn't know how to fix things without making it worse. I blinked fast, trying to clear the blur. You were the one who took me to chemo. You were the one who paid the utility bills when I was too proud to ask. I've seen everything you've done, quietly. You never made it about you. And that's why I trust you to handle what comes next. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from them. Mom, I folded the letter slowly, hands trembling. "You want a few minutes alone?" Melinda asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak. She stepped out, pulling the curtain closed behind her. I leaned forward, took my mother's hand. Her skin was dry, paper thin, and cold around the fingertips, but there was warmth beneath. "I got your letter," I whispered. "I'm here." She didn't open her eyes, but her lips moved slightly. "Thank you," I heard, almost inaudibly, for the next 20 minutes. I stayed with her. I told her about the time I nearly got fired for leaving work to take her to that scan. I told her about the way David talked over me at the last family dinner. I told her I forgave her. Not because she asked, but because holding on to the hurt felt like carrying someone else's weight. When I emerged from the room, the hallway felt colder. David was still there, arms crossed, jaw tight. He looked me up and down like I had committed a crime just by existing. "You got in," he said flatly. "She asked for me?" I replied, "She's not in her right mind right now." He snapped, voice too loud for the quiet corridor. "You always sneak around like you're the victim. It's pathetic." I didn't say anything. I walked past him, but not fast. Calm. I could feel him watching me, waiting for me to bite back. But I didn't. Not now. Back in the lobby, I sat down and texted my landlord to say I'd need a few days off. I texted my boss to say I'd be out of the office tomorrow. No explanation. Then I wrote a message to Melinda, thanking her, and I opened the voice memo app on my phone. I didn't know why, but I began recording. My name is Leah Ramirez. This is what happened tonight. If anything changes, this is where it started. As I spoke, I realized I was drawing a line, not between me and David, not between me and the rest of the family, but between the silence and the truth. I would go home and check the linen cabinet. I'd find the folder. I'd read the full will, but I already knew what was in it. The next chapter didn't begin when I inherited anything. It began when my mother finally saw me and told the world who I was, even if she did it from a hospital bed. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I walked. Out past the visitor lot, past the cigarette-smoking orderlies near the dumpsters, past the glow of the streetlights puddled over cracked pavement. I just walked. The hospital loomed behind me like a sealed fortress, one that had kept me out until my mother herself unlocked the gate. Now, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to feel triumphant or guilty. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Eventually, I ended up at a diner I hadn't seen in years. It was the kind of place that smelled like frying oil no matter what time of day you entered. Same red pleather booths, same black and white checkered floor. The waitress behind the counter glanced up when I walked in and nodded, like I was just another face in a long, silent parade. I took a booth in the back, slid in, and ordered coffee. I wouldn't drink. When she left the cup and creamer, I opened my phone and hovered over David's contact. My finger trembled. Not because I was scared of him, but because I wasn't sure what version of myself I'd become if I called. Would I scream? Would I beg? Would I try to be the bigger person again? Like I always had. I hit back, closed it. Instead, I opened the voice memo again and hit record. It's 10:48 p.m. I haven't opened the folder yet, but I already feel something shifting. I don't know if this is what relief feels like or if I'm just bracing for another storm. I stopped it and stared at the steam rising from the untouched cup. I remembered the time I got the acceptance letter from UCLA. Mom cried. Of course. David scoffed. So you think you're too good for community college now, he had said, loud enough for the whole house to hear. I had gone anyway. Scholarship, side jobs, ramen and 2-hour bus commutes. I never asked Mom for money. I figured she couldn't give what she didn't have, but I called her every week, even when she didn't always pick up. I don't think I realized until tonight just how much that shaped everything. Not the calls, but the quiet that followed. The way she never spoke about me to the rest of them. The way she let David shine even when he'd barely held a job for more than 6 months. The way I became the background daughter. The nurse knew my name. That shouldn't have meant so much. I paid for the coffee with a 10, left the change, and made my way back to my apartment just after midnight. The linen closet was exactly where she said, behind the towels, far back where I had to stretch my arm in and feel around like a blind person searching in the dark. I found it. A sky blue folder, fastened with an elastic band. Inside neatly labeled documents. Dated. Signed. I sat on the floor of my bathroom with the door closed and read it all like a novel I wasn't ready for. She left everything to me. The house. The life insurance payout. The family business account that still had more money in it than I realized she even had. There were handwritten notes in the margins of one sheet, scribbled reminders to add details, to remove David from the beneficiary list. She had even made a copy of her original will, the one where David was listed as the primary, and next to that, a short note. If you're reading this, you've already found the truth. I'm sorry for waiting so long to make it real. I didn't cry. Not then. But I did something I hadn't done in years. I laid on the cold tile and let myself feel completely alone without rushing to fix it. The next morning, I returned to the hospital. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the night nurse at the desk smiled when she saw me. "She's awake," she said softly. "Asked if you were coming back." When I walked into the room, Mom's eyes were open, faint, cloudy, but locked onto mine. She smiled, weak, but real. "You found it," she rasped. I nodded and sat beside her. "I did." Her fingers searched for mine under the blanket. I laced them gently. "David doesn't know," she whispered. "He'll be loud." "He already is," I said with a soft smile. "I'm not worried." She took a shaky breath. "You were always the quiet one, but stronger than all of them." We sat in silence for a while. She drifted in and out, her body slowly betraying her, when Melinda came in with new meds. I stepped out into the hall and texted my boss again. "Taking the week. Thanks for understanding." I called a lawyer next. Asked him how soon the new will could be verified. He said as long as everything was signed and witnessed. It was solid. The old one void. I didn't tell him yet that I wasn't sure I even wanted everything. That I didn't know if a house left empty by death could ever feel like home again. That night, David called. I didn't answer. He texted. "I heard what she did. If you think this changes anything, you're wrong." Then another. "You always play the victim. Don't think this makes you better than me." I blocked him. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done living my life as if I had to defend it from people who never truly saw me. Mom slipped in and out of lucidity over the next few days. I stayed with her every moment. I held her hand. I read her old letters aloud. I played the songs she used to hum when I was little. I brought lavender oil and dabbed it on her wrists. I combed her hair gently and tied it back with the silk scarf she used to wear to Sunday church. Once, while she was asleep, Aunt Carla came in. She didn't say a word. Just stood by the door, eyes red, clutching a tissue. "I didn't know she was going to change the will," she said after a while. I didn't answer. She nodded, like she didn't expect me to. "I just thought David needed it more," she whispered. "Maybe he did," I said, "but I never asked for anything, and I'm the one who was here." She didn't argue. She left soon after. On the fourth night, Mom had a moment of clarity. She opened her eyes, smiled at me, and said, "Tell them I chose you, not out of guilt, out of faith." Then she fell asleep again. And this time, she didn't wake. But the machines didn't beep in panic. They slowed, then stilled. And the room felt quiet, not empty, just quiet. I stood there, breathing her silence like it was a kind of mercy. I stayed in the room until they asked me to leave. Not rudely, just gently, the way someone closes a door behind you after you've said everything you needed to say. A nurse I hadn't met before offered to call someone for me. I shook my head. There was no one to call, not anyone who mattered. The morgue staff came in quietly. I stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall while they did what they were trained to do. Melinda found me an hour later in the family lounge, where the coffee was stale and the chairs were bolted to the floor. She sat across from me, held out a small brown paper bag. "You haven't eaten today." I blinked. My body had become distant, something I walked around inside, but barely listened to. "Thank you," I said, though I didn't open it. "She was proud of you," she said after a pause. I gave her a look. Not angry, just worn. "You didn't even know her." Melinda gave a soft shrug. "Nurses notice the quiet things, like who shows up, who doesn't." I looked down at my hands. My nails were bitten short, my cuticles dry. I hadn't noticed how cold they'd gotten until I rubbed them together. She knew this was going to cause problems. I said, changing the will, giving me everything. She also knew who took it. Melinda replied, her tone leveled. That's not a problem. That's a choice. I didn't know what to say, so I nodded and said nothing. That night, I drove to the house, the old house, the one I grew up in, the one that was now legally mine. The driveway gravel crunched under my tires like a sound from childhood. I sat there a long while before getting out. The key turned easily in the lock, like the house hadn't even noticed she'd been gone. Inside, the air smelled like dust and lemon polish. The furniture was still the same, the sagging floral couch, the oversized hutch full of porcelain plates, the framed graduation photos mine tucked behind a lamp. David's hanging on the hallway wall. I walked through each room like I was walking through a museum no one had curated in years. In her bedroom, I found her slippers neatly tucked beside the bed, her scarf still looped over the bedpost, her glasses resting on the nightstand as if she'd just taken them off before a nap. I sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the wall across from me. It was strange, being back here as the legal owner. Stranger still knowing that I could decide what stayed and what didn't. For the next few days, I handled what needed to be handled. I called the funeral home, I signed the certificates. I spoke to her doctor, who sounded sorry but tired, like this was the 30th call of his day. I filed the new will with probate, faxed copies to the attorney, and avoided David's number even though it called twice a day. It was on the 4th call that I finally picked up. "You think this is over?" he barked before I could even say hello. "You think you can just rewrite our family? I didn't write anything," I said quietly. She did. She wasn't in her right mind. She was more lucid than you give her credit for. "You're stealing from your own blood." "Leah." "No," I said, calmly. "I'm honoring the only person who ever saw me bleed and didn't look away." There was silence on the other end. I expected him to shout again, but instead, he laughed, cold. "You always wanted to be the saint, the good daughter. Well, now you got your crown. Let's see how long you wear it before it chokes you." I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I learned to crack eggs, where she used to braid my hair at the table and let the quiet settle. The funeral was small, smaller than it should have been for someone like my mother. But that was the thing about her, she had shrunk in everyone's life, even as she carried them. Aunt Carla came. David didn't. A few neighbors came. One brought a dish of lemon bars and left it on the pew beside me without saying a word. I spoke, though I hadn't planned to. Not a eulogy, exactly just a memory. She used to hum when she cleaned. I said into the microphone, Spanish lullabies. She said it kept her from losing her mind when we were kids. She'd hum and scrub and sweep, like she was turning the noise of our lives into something softer. People nodded. A few smiled. She wasn't perfect, but she never turned away when things got hard. She looked life straight in the eye and just kept going. I looked down at the folded paper in my hand but didn't need it. And no matter how quiet she became, she never stopped watching. She saw everything, even when we thought she didn't. I stepped down. Afterward, people offered the usual condolences. She was proud of you. She's in a better place. She's at peace now. But one woman, older, maybe from the neighborhood, leaned in as she hugged me and whispered, "You were her heart." I almost lost it right there. Back at the house, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the back porch. The sun was going down, casting long shadows across the dry lawn. I pulled out the envelope again, the one she had given Melinda. I read it again. I knew the words by heart now, but I needed to see her handwriting, the way her L's curled and how she never dotted her I's. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees. I thought about her last words to me. Tell them I chose you. Not out of guilt. Out of faith. I whispered them out loud, just to feel them leave my mouth. Out of faith. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe David would contest the will. Maybe Aunt Carla would side with him. Maybe this would turn into a long, messy court battle. But maybe it wouldn't. Maybe silence would be the last gift she gave me. Not absence, but clarity. For the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that being chosen didn't mean I owed the world a performance. It meant I had already earned something no one else could see. And that was enough for now. The week after the funeral passed in a strange kind of hush. Not quite silence, but something like it, like the whole world had turned the volume down and left me alone with the feedback. I didn't go back to work right away. My boss was surprisingly kind about it. Take your time, she said. Grief doesn't punch a clock. But I didn't tell her what I was really doing with the time. I was sorting, box by box, drawer by drawer. In the mornings, I started in the kitchen, where my mother had kept rows of spices labeled in both English and Spanish. The labels were peeling. The cinnamon had clumped, but I didn't throw them out. Not yet. I lined them up on the counter like tiny memories: comino, laurel, ajo and polvo. The afternoons were for the hall closet, the junk drawer, the shoebox under her bed. I found things I didn't expect. Photos I'd never seen Mom young and smiling with a braid over her shoulder. Standing in front of a dusty Chevrolet with someone's arm around her waist. A man I didn't recognize. I found birthday cards I'd written her when I was 7, all in bright crayon with too many hearts. She'd kept them in a Ziploc bag, sealed like treasure. I found receipts folded into the spine of an old cookbook, one for my textbooks, another for a pair of boots I'd circled in a catalog but never bought. She must have known. She must have sent them anonymously. She never said anything. That was her way. At night. I sat on the living room floor and read her journals. Not full diaries, just scraps pages torn from notepads, stuck between cookbooks or taped to the inside of drawers. One said David lies to protect his pride. Leah hides to protect her peace. Another, I told her not to come home after UCLA, but it broke my heart to say it. And this, she thinks I don't see her. I see everything. I just didn't know how to tell her. Some nights, those sentences made me cry. Other nights, I just sat with them in silence, letting them exist without asking for more. One afternoon, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find David standing there. He didn't say anything right away, just looked over my shoulder into the house, like he expected to see our mother walking by with a cup of tea. She's not here, I said, stepping out onto the porch and closing the door behind me. I know, he said. Obviously. We stood there for a long moment. The breeze stirred the chimes that hung from the porch beam. They made a sound like broken ice in a glass. I'm not here to fight, he said eventually. I nodded, cautious. Okay. He looked down at his shoes. I found out you filed the will. I did. I talked to a lawyer. He says it's legit. I said nothing. He scratched the back of his neck. Look, I don't want the house. Or the insurance. I didn't know she changed it. She never said anything. She didn't say much to anyone. I replied. He nodded. Still, I thought I was the one she trusted. Maybe she did. For a while. He looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed but dry. Did she tell you why? Not in so many words. But I think she saw things differently at the end. David leaned against the porch railing. I messed up a lot. Huh. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He gave a small, bitter laugh. You were always the quiet one. I never knew if you hated me or just didn't care. I cared, I said softly. I just learned not to expect anything back. He winced. That landed. I guess I came to say I'm not going to contest it. The will. I mean, it's yours. Everything. I felt something loosen in my chest, but it wasn't relief exactly. More like release. Thank you, I said. He looked at me like he wanted to say something else. Maybe even apologize. But he didn't. He just stepped off the porch and walked back to his car, hands in his pockets. After he left, I went back inside and sat on the couch, the same couch we'd fought on, cried on, and once fell asleep watching old cartoons together. I closed my eyes, for the first time in weeks. I felt something approaching stillness, not happiness, not resolution, but space. Space to breathe. Space to think about what I wanted to do with this house, this legacy, this silence my mother had left me. Later that evening, I called Melinda. I just wanted to say thank you again. I told her. You don't need to, she replied, but you're welcome. Do you ever get used to this part? The after. There was a pause on the line. No, she said, but you learn how to carry it without it swallowing you whole. I let her words settle. Before we hung up, she added, she wasn't perfect, but she was trying. Right up to the end. I know. I whispered. Me too. That night, I opened the windows in every room, let the air sweep through the house like a blessing. I stood barefoot in the middle of the living room, eyes closed, arms crossed over my chest, and I imagined her voice. Not loud, not commanding, just a hum. That old lullaby, the one without words. And I hummed it back. For her. For me. For the quiet between us that had finally begun to speak. The week after David's visit, I started boxing up her clothes. It was the hardest part. Not because of the fabric or the volume of it, she hadn't been extravagant, but because of the smell. That faint trace of her skin, her shampoo, the vanilla lotion she kept by the bathroom mirror. The first sweater I touched made me pause. It was cream-colored, soft, with one sleeve slightly frayed at the wrist. She used to wear it on Sunday mornings when she read the paper, always with a chipped mug full of black coffee and lemon. I sat on the edge of her bed and just held it, unsure whether to keep it or let it go. I ended up folding it into a separate box labeled undecided. By the end of the day, there were 4 boxes: donation, trash, archive, and that undecided one sitting quietly in the corner like a question I couldn't answer. I opened her jewelry box next. Inside, costume pieces, mostly plastic bangles, imitation pearls, a few clip-on earrings that had lost their mates, and one envelope, unlabeled. Inside was a small gold ring I didn't recognize, delicate, a bit tarnished, with a single green stone in the center. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't her style, not the practical, budget-conscious woman who made grocery lists by aisle and always bought off-brand toothpaste. This ring felt like a secret. I slipped it on my pinky finger. It was too loose, but I kept it there anyway. Later that night, I made tea and sat in the living room with the ring still on my hand. That's when I saw the small red notebook wedged between 2 cookbooks on the shelf. It wasn't labeled. I opened it and found it filled with clippings, articles about legal careers, scholarships for women of color, stories of Latina judges and attorneys. Some of the pages were underlined in red. Others had sticky notes attached. This could be Leah one day. I felt my breath catch. She had watched. Maybe she didn't say the words. Maybe she didn't throw parties or post about me on social media like David's accomplishments always earned. But she had gathered proof of me, quietly, and she had saved it all. I touched one article about a woman who had won a civil rights case against her employer. There was a star in the margin, and next to it, Mom had written, "Leah has this kind of fight in her." I closed the notebook and held it to my chest. The next morning, I woke up early. I cleaned the kitchen. I swept the porch. I made coffee the way she did, strong, bitter, no cream. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I typed a new document, estate transition plan, Ramirez household. It was time to handle the logistics. The insurance company needed updated beneficiary details. The bank required an original death certificate. The county assessor's office would reappraise the property. I made calls, took notes, made folders. It helped. Oddly, like organizing the chaos gave me somewhere to place the pain. In the afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Latham, our neighbor 2 doors down. He was in his 80s now, stooped, with watery eyes and a voice like gravel. "I heard," he said simply. "She was a good woman. She was," I said, and meant it. He handed me a plastic container. "Peach cobbler. You were always her favorite. You know." Not that she'd say it out loud. I smiled. "Thank you. Mr. Latham. She used to talk about you," he said, pausing, not in front of David, but when he wasn't around. "She'd mention how proud she was of you." "She did." He nodded. "Said you carried the whole family without asking for a thing." I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. Instead, I just said, "That sounds like her." After he left, I ate a spoonful of the cobbler cold, right out of the container. It tasted like summers I hadn't thought about in years. That evening, I opened the linen cabinet again. Not for the will, but for what I had missed. Tucked in the back, in an old gift bag, was a stack of letters. They were all addressed to me. Not mailed, not sent, just written. One for every birthday I hadn't spent at home. One for my graduation. One for the day I moved to Los Angeles. The handwriting was shaky in the later ones, but still hers. I read them slowly, like they were prayers. Each one a piece of her I didn't know I had. In one, she wrote, "You never needed my permission to be who you are, but I should have given it anyway." In another, I told myself silence was strength, but maybe words would have given you more. By the time I reached the final one, dated just a month before she passed, I was crying. "You have become the woman I never had the courage to be. That's not a burden, it's a blessing. You walk in rooms I was never invited into, and you do it with quiet grace. That is not invisible. That is power." I clutched the letter like it might disappear, and for the first time since she died, I didn't feel like I was grieving a stranger. I was mourning someone who had finally shown me her whole self, flawed, afraid, but fiercely, undeniably mine. The next day, I packed away her china. I washed her scarves. I chose a corner of the living room and made a small shrine her photo, a candle, the ring, the letters, not for display, just for me, to remember, to forgive, to continue. That night, I stood at the front window, lights off, and looked out at the street we'd lived on for 3 decades. It looked the same, but I wasn't the same. Something had shifted, and it wasn't just about ownership, it was about presence. I was here now, fully, and for the first time in years, I knew I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I already had been, quietly, powerfully, by the one person whose voice mattered most. The following week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I invited people over. Not for a party, not even a formal gathering. Just a few of Mom's old friends from the neighborhood, Melinda the nurse, and 2 colleagues from the legal office who'd left handwritten notes on my desk the week I vanished. It wasn't much, some empanadas from the bakery downtown, a pitcher of hibiscus tea, and a tray of sugar-dusted cookies I burned slightly. I didn't care. It felt real. They sat around the same living room where we'd celebrated birthdays and endured long nights of flu and heartbreak. I told them I was keeping the house, at least for now. You'll make it your own, Melinda said, sipping slowly from her glass, but it still feels like her. I nodded. Yeah, it does. One of Mom's church friends, Doña Marta, brought a tin of rosary beads she said my mother had asked her to give me. Inside was a note. These were my mother's. Keep them close when you feel far from yourself. I hadn't seen her handwriting in days. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I saw it again, slanted and loopy, like she was in a rush to get it all down before life interrupted. After everyone left, I stood in the hallway, unsure what to do next. The quiet didn't feel heavy anymore, but it was still deep, still wide. That night, I opened my laptop and began typing, not for work, not for a memo, for me, a letter. To her. Hi, Mom. I wish you could have seen the way people talked about you today. They didn't just mourn you, they knew you. The version of you I always suspected existed behind the silence. I'm still unpacking the truth, still sorting out what it means to be the one you chose. And I keep finding you in strange places, in how I fold the laundry, in the way I add cumin to soup without tasting it. In the silence I used to think was rejection, but now feels more like shelter. I'm learning that you didn't have the language to say what I needed to hear, but you tried, and I'm starting to understand. That was enough. I saved the letter in a folder named For Her. No one else needed to read it. The next morning, I went into her garden. It had grown wild in her final months, weeds threading through the planter boxes, basil plants flowering past their prime. I put on gloves and got to work. It was small at first, trimming dead branches, pulling weeds from the roots, sweeping up the broken tiles near the side fence. But the more I worked, the more I felt her there. Not watching, not judging, just present. By mid-afternoon, my arms ached, my back was tight, and my fingernails were black with soil. But I stood there, sweating under the sun, smiling at the little order I had carved back into the mess. That's when I heard the voice from across the fence. Leah. I turned. Mrs. Patel, our longtime neighbor, stood on her tiptoes, peering over the edge of the wooden slats. I haven't seen you outside in years, I laughed. It's been a while. She tilted her head. Your mother would be proud. She always hated when the marigolds went wild. She told you that. Oh, please, she said, waving her hand. She told everyone. She just didn't want to nag you about it. I smiled again. Smaller this time. Thanks for saying that. She loved you. Leah, Mrs. Patel said. More gently now, even when she didn't know how to show it. I swallowed hard and nodded. I know. That evening, I found the marigold seeds in the drawer by the sink, an unopened packet with the corner torn just enough to show the gold inside. She must have meant to plant them. So I did. Row by row, hands in the soil, like it meant something, like I could still build something from what she left behind. A few days later, I got a call from her attorney. The probate is going smoothly, he said. There's nothing to worry about. I wasn't worried. But hearing it out loud felt like an anchor dropping gently in my chest. He paused before continuing. There's one more thing. I sat up straighter. She wrote a letter for you, he said. Not part of the will. More of a personal document. She left it with me last fall and asked me to wait until after the funeral to deliver it. He asked if I'd like him to mail it or come pick it up. I said I'd be there in an hour. When he handed it to me, it was sealed in a pink envelope, faded, like it had waited through more than just months. I didn't open it until I was back in the car. I read it in the parking lot, engine off, windows cracked, with the sun warming my arms. Leah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And hopefully, I had the courage to tell you some of this face to face, but if I didn't, forgive me. I wasn't raised to speak about feelings. I was raised to endure, to stay quiet, to put everyone else first. I saw you doing the same thing, and it terrified me, because you deserved better. I want you to know I noticed. All of it. The nights you stayed late at work just to afford your own apartment. The weekends you showed up for me even when I didn't ask. The way you kept your head down when your brother made you feel small. I should have protected you. I should have said something, but I was afraid if I spoke up, the whole illusion would fall apart. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to live differently. Speak when it's hard. Ask for what you need. And never shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You don't owe anyone your silence. You earned your voice. I love you. Always. I read it twice. The second time, I whispered the words aloud, not because I needed to hear them again, but because I wanted them to land in the space she used to occupy. And somehow, it felt like they did. That night, I lit a candle by her photo. I tucked the letter behind the frame, where only I would know it was there. And then I stood at the kitchen window, watching the moon rise over our street, listening to the wind rustle the leaves of the garden I had started to reclaim. No music, no noise, just breath, just space, just the quiet shape of a mother's love finally spelled out. The morning after reading her letter, I woke before the sun. No alarm, no noise, just that strange inner pull you feel when something in your life is asking to be tended to. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, warm wood beneath my feet, and made coffee without turning on the lights. The sun hadn't yet crested over the horizon, but the sky was bruising with hints of lavender and soft gray. A new day forming. I brought the mug to the back porch and watched the marigold seeds, barely breaking through the dirt. A few green shoots had started to nudge their way upward. Tiny, defiant things. That's when the idea came. It wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself like a lightning bolt. It arrived like breath, like a gentle knock from the inside. I would stay, not just in the house, but here, in this life, in the truth of it. I wouldn't try to move on in the way people usually meant. I'd move inward, root down, build forward, quietly, just like she did, but differently, too. Later that day, I found the manila envelope labeled business records in the back of the hall closet. I'd seen it before, when I was younger. I'd assumed it had to do with taxes or maybe the dry cleaning receipts she never let anyone throw out. But inside was more than I expected. Receipts from when she registered her cleaning service as a sole proprietorship in 1998. Flyers with her logo, hand-drawn in blue pen, a ledger book, old school, with columns and scribbles and her handwriting getting sharper in each month. Clients I remembered only vaguely names like Mrs. Donnelly, Tuesdays, and Dr. Langston, bi-weekly, always pays late. At the very bottom of the envelope was a handwritten business plan. 5 pages. Simple. Focused. Clear. And at the end, if Leah ever wants to use this, it's hers. I stared at the page for a long time. My mother had never told me she'd once planned to grow her business into something more than survival. A cleaning company, a team of women, services offered to offices, schools, real estate firms. She had the name and everything Ramirez Home and Office Care. The logo A broom crossed with a briefcase. It was hilarious and brilliant. I laughed. The kind of laugh that comes with tears mixed in. A laugh that cracks you open. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I wasn't going to throw it away. I made a copy. I scanned it. I put it in a folder on my desktop labeled Mom's Dreams. Then I opened my resume and started updating it. Not to apply anywhere. Not yet. Just to remind myself what I was made of. Where I'd come from. What I carried. A woman who paid her own way through college. A daughter who sat beside a hospital bed while everyone else kept their distance. An executor of a legacy no one else had expected. A quiet force that didn't need to scream to be real. That week, I joined a grief support group. Not in person, online, late at night when the silence got too thick. I didn't turn on my camera. I didn't speak much at first. I just listened. One by one, people letting their pain out in small, unvarnished pieces. I finally spoke on the third session. My mom died 2 weeks ago, I said. And she left me something I didn't expect. Not money, not a house, but clarity. And now I don't know what to do with it. It feels too big to carry alone, and too precious to let go. There was silence. Then a woman named April, said, "That sounds like the start of a different life." I didn't respond, but the words stayed with me. On Sunday, I went back to the cemetery. I brought marigolds, orange and gold, freshly cut. I knelt beside the headstone, still new, still clean. I didn't say anything at first, just sat with her, with the air, with the fact that I didn't feel hollow. I felt full. I laid the marigolds down gently, right along the base. I planted some at home. I said, "They're already sprouting." A wind passed through the trees overhead. She never got to say goodbye, I heard myself say. But I had. And that mattered more than I realized. I stood, brushed the dirt from my hands, and I whispered, "Thank you." Not because I was healed, but because I had finally started. Back home, I put on music. Old boleros, the kind she used to hum when she thought no one was listening. I cooked dinner from one of her handwritten recipes, the one with the corner burned from when David dropped it behind the stove when we were kids. I set the table, just one plate, but it felt like enough. I didn't light a candle, didn't cry, I just ate. And afterward, I opened a blank document, and I began to write. Not about grief, but about inheritance. Real inheritance. The kind that isn't measured in dollars but in memory, in rhythm, in the way your hands move when you fold a shirt or unlock a door. That night, I called my boss. "I'm coming back Monday," I said. She asked if I was sure. "No," I replied, "but I think that's the point." We both laughed. "You've always been the steady one," she said, "even when you disappeared." We all said the same thing: Leah's not gone. She's just somewhere important. She was right. I'd been somewhere sacred. And now, I was returning with more than I left with. On Monday morning, I put on the gold ring. It still didn't fit quite right, but I wore it anyway. I dressed simply: slacks, blouse, the gray blazer I always used for court filings. And as I stood at the front door, keys in hand, I looked over my shoulder, at the photo on the shelf, the framed letter behind it, the flowers blooming slowly outside the kitchen window. This house was no longer a relic. It was becoming a beginning. I stepped outside, locked the door, took a breath, and walked forward. Not to escape, but to carry, to continue, to live the kind of life that made her proud even in her absence. Because now, finally, I understood. I wasn't just her daughter. I was her echo, her continuation, her voice finally spoken.